So today I'm doing my Premier League prediction for the new season that's about to start in 2 days. I'm recording this on the 3rd of August. I did this so it's the closest to the start of the season, so the team can make the most transfers that I can factor in for the video. So let's start at 20th place. I have Bournemouth. I just think they didn't even do much transfers. They got Ryan Fredericks for free and Joe Rothwell. But they're both like Champions League, Championship side players. They're not really made for the Premier League. They're not good enough. And they signed Marcus Tavernier for 12 million from Middlesbrough, which is a good player, but I don't think that just one player who's good is gonna help you stay in the Premier League. So that's why Bournemouth, for me, are last place this season. Then at 19th place I have Fulham, which isn't a surprise since Fulham and Norwich in the last few years have been the elevator clubs in the Premier League. Came up, then relegated immediately next season, unlike Brentford or Leeds or even Aston Villa, who managed to stay up. So it's definitely possible to stay up in the Premier League if you come up from the Championship. But Fulham and Norwich, they don't manage to do that. And this year they did better with transfers. They didn't just spend all the money on different players. And they even got most of the players under market value, which is pretty impressive. So I still think that from the last season that they spent in the Premier League, they're going to improve this year. But it still won't be enough to stay in the Premier League. They got Bernd Leno from Arsenal for 3.6 million. They got Kevin Mbabu from Wolfsburg. They got the talent from Shakhtar, Solomon. They have Andres Pereira from Manchester United. Not really impressive, but yeah. João Paulinho from Sporting, which is a good player, but as said with Bournemouth, just one player being good doesn't really get you far in the Premier League, and I still don't think it's enough for them. So at 19th, Fulham. Then we come to the 18th place, and that's the place where I had the most trouble picking a team because I couldn't decide. So I went with Southampton. Even though they did a lot of good transfers, they're good for the future. I don't think that they're gonna help them this season that much. They obviously lost Armando Broja, the striker from Chelsea that they loaned out, which is probably gonna be a massive loss for them, because I don't think Che Adams is gonna fill that hole of the striker position. But the transfer window was pretty good for the future, but I don't think it's gonna be enough to keep them in the Premier League. They bought Bazunu from Man City, the young goalkeeper, for 14 million. They bought Romeo Lavia, he was some young guy, some midfield player, for 12.3 million. They got Bella Kotchap for 10 million, which is his exact market value. That's pretty good. Joe Aribo from Rangers. That was a really good season at Rangers. And I think he would be a one who, if Southampton stay up, Joe Aribo is gonna play a big role in the midfield, because I think it's the most important thing. And they also have James Ward-Prowse. And last, they bought Sekou Mara from, I think it was Bordeaux. And I think Bordeaux got relegated to the third France division. And they bought him for 13 million, which, I mean, he's a young player, but I think it was kind of they overpaid for him massively, in my opinion. A lot of Premier League teams overpaid for players this season. 17th, I have Nottingham Forest. I think Nottingham Forest are gonna stay up in the Premier League this season. They haven't lost any players outside of Bryce Samba, their goalkeeper. But they brought in Dean Henderson on loan from Manchester United, who I think most people who watch the Premier League know that he's good. They also brought in a lot of Bundesliga players like Taivo Ovani from Union Berlin for 20.5 million. They brought in Moussa Niakate from Mainz, the centre back, and they brought in Omar Richards from Bayern. And Oral Malanga from Stuttgart for 13 million, which I think is a really good deal because I think he's a very good midfielder. They also got Jesse Lingard for free from Manchester United. And they bought Nico Williams, I think he's a left back, from Liverpool for 20 million. There was a lot that they spent on him. So they have to hope that he's at least gonna improve them. And at last they bought Biancone for 10 million, which also, in my opinion, they all overpaid massively. Even though I think he's young, he's like 20 years old if I'm not mistaken. But still. And it's also gonna be important if they can play together or if they just are gonna be like Fulham 2 seasons ago, where they just can't connect and then they're just gonna lose most of the games because they don't have any team chemistry and they're gonna at the end get relegated. But I have Nottingham Forest at 17 and therefore I think that they're gonna stay up in the Premier League. At 16th place I have Leeds. I personally wish that Leeds would do good in the Premier League because they have a lot of players that I like and I think it's a cool team that plays offensive, unlike other teams who get promoted sometimes, or like Leeds in the first season literally went all out attack, which that's a kind of football that I like, not with teams like, I don't know, like for example Atletico Madrid would just stay back 24/7, just defend the whole time. And it's most games go out 1-0 and then that's it. With Leeds, they at least under Bielsa, they played massively attacking formations mostly, and that's what I like. And I mean, obviously they lost they lost their 2 best players with Rafinha, who went to Barcelona, and Calvin Phillips, who went to Manchester City. But I think they made good replacements for that from Luis Sinisterra from Feyenoord for 25 million. They bought Tyler Adams for 20 million as a replacement for Calvin Phillips. They got, I think Brent Aaron's his name, which they paid a lot of, 32 million, that's a lot of money. And they also got Christensen for 30 million from Salzburg. They got Marc Roca from Bayern, which they paid 12 million for. That's a lot of money because I don't think he's gonna be a success. At Bayern he was already, I think most of the times when I saw him play he was just terrible. And then they bought some young kid from Manchester City, Darko Gyabi, for 5.8 million. Yeah, and I think Leeds are gonna be an okay team this season and gonna finish in 16th place. At 15th, I got Everton. I think Frank Lampard is a pretty good coach if he has the right players to do it. So at Everton it's going to be a pretty hard job for him to manage to stay in the Premier League, especially since now they lost Richarlison to Tottenham. And as of right now, they didn't really bring in a lot of players. They bought in James Tarkowski for free from Burnley and Dwight McNeil. I don't know the fee. Transfer market doesn't state how much they paid for him, so I don't know. But still, I would say I'm gonna put Everton at 15th, and I think they're gonna not survive easily, but I think there's gonna be like an 8-point gap between them and relegation. Otherwise, there's not much to say about them. At 14th, I got Brentford. Brentford this year did pretty good. Last season, were pretty good. Obviously, they lost Eriksen now, which is gonna be a hard hit for them. But if they lose Ivan Toney to Newcastle, then there's an argument for them to get relegated. But right now, I don't see them getting relegated. With the transfer, they brought in Ben Mee for free. They got Strakosha for free, who was goalkeeper for Lazio, so it's a pretty good goalkeeper. They brought in Luis Potter from, I think it was Hull City, for 19 million. So there wasn't a cheap transfer, but I think he can be really good. Maybe he hits the ground running just like Jarek Bowen did in West Ham, which would be really cool. And last they have Aaron Hickey from Bologna for 16.5 million. And now that he also plays in the Prem, they have 3 Scottish left backs who play in the Premier League. And I think Brentford are comfortably gonna finish in 14th without being scared of relegation, just like this year. In 13th, I have Brighton and Hove Albion. Brighton, I think this was already talked a lot in the media and so, that if they just had a good striker who would finish the chances that they create, they would be like top 8 side in the Premier League. And we also saw that they are pretty much capable of keeping up with the top teams. Like sometimes in season they beat United or Tottenham, or even sometimes they beat City, or they drew against Liverpool. So Brighton is a pretty good side if they would just finish their chances, if they had a good striker. And this year Dennis Undav came back from a loan at, I don't remember, it was a Belgium club I think. They also play Champions League qualification right now against Rangers. I don't know the name. But if Dennis Undav actually manages to I would say score maybe 15 goals this season. Obviously the Premier League is a much harder league to play in than the Belgium League. But if he just manages to be at the right position and play a good striker role and score 12 to 15 goals, I think Brighton have a pretty good chance to even finish higher. Obviously they lost Yves Bissouma also to Tottenham, which is a massive hit for them. And right now they haven't even bought a replacement for him. And that's kind of the reason why I put them at 13. If they still had Bissouma, I probably would have even put them at 10th place or so. But for now, I put them at 13th. In 12th place, I went with Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace this year, at the moment as I'm recording this, haven't lost a player outside of Kouyaté, which he was 32 years old, so even if they would have sold him, they wouldn't have got a lot of money for him. But still, they brought in Chris Richards for 12 million from Bayern. That's a pretty good transfer. And they got Jake Doucouré from, I think it was RC Lens, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not pretty sure right now. But that's a pretty good transfer. Yes, it was RC Lens. As I said, they haven't lost any player. They even gained They got squad depth, so I think they're gonna be pretty comfortably playing in mid-table. They're gonna even surprise sometimes, like maybe win against Arsenal, Tottenham or so. And they also brought in Malcolm Eboivi. I don't know how to say his name. He was from Derby County, I think. And they got him on a free, which is pretty good. And yeah, I think they have a lot of squad depth with Edward, Benteke, Saha. I think they still have Ayu, I'm not sure. Eze, Olise. Obviously they lost Conor Gallagher, who went back to Chelsea. So Doucouré is actually a perfect replacement for him, even though he's more like a defensive player, but still. Yeah, and I think Crystal Palace are gonna be easily safe at 12th place and won't have anything to do with the relegation. But at 11th, I have Wolves. Wolves last season also were pretty bad. Sometimes they just, I remember against Leeds, they were winning 2-0 and then they just got some stupid record and then lost 3-2 at the end. Now in this transfer window they sold Ruben Vinagre to Sporting, who then loaned them out to Everton. Trincao went back to Barcelona, exactly. They lost Roman Saiz, who went to Besiktas. And they loaned out Keanu Hover and Fabio Silva, which I don't really understand. I mean, they got back Patrick Cutrone, who was loaned out to Empoli, but if Raul Jimenez gets injured again, I think Fabio Silva would be a better player to replace him than Cutrone. Who they brought in, they only brought one player, that was Nathan Collins from Burnley for 24.3 million, which was pretty expensive, and I don't think he's gonna help them improve anything. So that's why I think that they're gonna finish the same place that they did this year, I think, right? Oh no, they were 10th. So I actually think that they're gonna finish one place lower than last season. In 10th, I got Leicester. Leicester this season, this transfer window, basically did nothing. Right now there's a rumor that Nizza wants to buy Schmeichel, and if they buy him, then they have to look for a new goalkeeper. And if they don't find one, then they're in massive problems. Then they're gonna have massive problems. The only player that came back was Dennis Pratt from loan, and they're heavily depending on all the players that come back from injury. And there was also the rumor right now that Chelsea wants to buy Wesley Fofana. So if that happens, that's even more of a problem for Leicester. And yeah, that's why I think that they're gonna finish in 10th, which I think last season they finished at the end in 9th. So they're also gonna go back one place from last season. In 9th, I have Aston Villa. I think Aston Villa this year are gonna be really good. They brought in Coutinho permanently from Barcelona for 20 million. They bought Diego Carlos for 31 million from Sevilla, and they loaned out Augustinsson from Sevilla. And they had, which I think is one of the free transfers this summer, and it's Boubacar Kamara from Olympique Marseille. I think he's gonna improve the midfield massively for Aston Villa, which players like what was his name? Nakamba failed to do. And Trezeguet, they sold him to Trabzonspor, and Matt Target to Newcastle. I think also Steven Gerrard is a really good manager, and if all the players, not all, but most of the players manage to stay fit, I think Aston Villa can go pretty far this season in the Premier League. In 8th place, I actually have Newcastle. Newcastle, we already saw it at the end of the season. They can easily manage to be in the top half of the Premier League, even though obviously most people would say they only managed that because of the money that they got now. I don't think so. I think that outside of Chris Wood, where they're massively overpriced, which was just a waste of money, I think most of the transfers that they did were actually sought out and made a lot of sense and weren't overpriced or so. And as of right now in the summer, they haven't lost anyone. Maybe, I don't know, they lost some players who were sitting on a bench or so, but those players are not important for me. So they brought in Sven Botman from, I think, Lille for 37 million, which is a lot. Matt Target, as I said, from Aston Villa for 17.5 million. And they got Nick Pope for 11.5 million. And there's a rumor that they're also gonna get Paqueta, which if they do, and they then have Paqueta and Bruno Guimaraes in their midfield, I think they're gonna easily push for one of the top 7 spot and for European football. Yeah, and also what's the name of the coach? Is it Eddie Howe? I think with Eddie Howe, he's an extremely good coach, and they're gonna easily survive Eddie Howe. They're easily gonna be in the top half of the Premier League table. At 7th, I went with West Ham. Well, I think West Ham are gonna finish the same place that they finished last season, in 7th. They haven't really lost any players outside of Fredericks and Masuaku, who were both wingbacks. They bought in Alphonse Areola that they had on loan from Paris Saint-Germain for 9.3 million, which I think is a really good keeper. So it's gonna be interesting to see if he's gonna start and Fabianski gonna be on the bench, or the other way around. They also bought they brought some guy from Stade Reims, the center back. I don't know how they say his name. Nafay Aguerd. I don't know. They bought him for 35 million, which is I think that's probably the worst transfer in the whole summer. It's probably the worst transfer this whole summer, if you think how much they paid to his market value, which is at 12 million. Obviously, it can be that they massively overpriced, they massively overpaid for him, but at the end he's gonna be like the best center back in the league this season, and then all the people are gonna say, even though they overpaid, he still was worth it, or it's just gonna be that he won't do good and it was just massively overpaid. They also brought Flying Downs. I don't know, I never heard of him. They paid 10.65 million for him from Swansea, and his market value is also like 2 million. So I think the West Ham, what do you call him, the guy who does the transfer business, likes to overpay for players. And last player that I bought was Scamacca from Sassuolo for 36 million, which was an extremely good transfer. I think he's actually gonna be one of the top scorers in the league this season. Yeah, I put West Ham in 7th, just like they finished last season. Because they have the quality to push for top 6, but I just think the other 6 teams are a little bit ahead of them to stay in top 6. That's why I put West Ham in 7th. At 6th place, I have Manchester United. I think Manchester United are gonna finish 6th this season, same as last season. Obviously they lost Paul Pogba, Nemanja Matic, who went to Rome. They lost Jesse Lingard. Was on the bench anyway, so wasn't really a loss. Edison Cavani didn't stay, and Pereira, who went to Fulham, but who cares about? They're not important players. They brought in Eriksen, which is massive for them. I think Eriksen is going to be really good at Manchester United. They brought in Tyrell Malacia, or how do you say his name, for 50 million. Left back, which now they have 3 left backs. I don't know why I don't know why they don't sell someone. Like, they could just sell Telles to make back the money. And Tuanzebe came back from the loan at Napoli. And last, they bought Lisandro Martinez from Ajax for 75.35 million, which I wouldn't say is overpriced or overpaid, but I don't think he's gonna make much of a difference for Manchester United. If he doesn't put Maguire next to him and Varane, but if one gets injured, what other options do you have to put Maguire in? And I don't think Varane is gonna stay fit. And Anthony Martial came back from...
Martial will be the best player in the world. Martial will be the best in the world.
In 5th place, this probably the first controversial note, but in 5th I went with Chelsea. I actually think that Chelsea is gonna have a hard time this season just because of their defense, because they lost Christensen and Rüdiger. They loaned out Lukaku back to Inter. I don't know, that was probably the worst comeback to a club that I've ever seen. And then they brought in Raheem Sterling, 56.2 million. They bought Kalidou Koulibaly for 38 million. And now they have Armando Broja back from his loan at Southampton, and Conor Gallagher from Crystal Palace. And I think actually if he would Tuchel would put Armando Broja if he would put him in the lineup as striker, I think he could actually be a good striker and help them a lot play this season and score goals and so. And that's why I put them at 5th place. Now we come to 4th place, and in 4th I have Tottenham. I think Tottenham are going to finish in 4th place. Obviously, they brought in Richarlison from Everton for 58 million. They bought Jet Spence for 15.7 million from Nottingham Forest, which I think is a very good player. And they also needed a right back. They got Ivan Perisic for a free transfer, which he's a good backup. They got Lenglet on loan from Barcelona, and Ndombele, Lo Celso, and a few others came back from their loan, and they only lost Steven Bergwijn, who wasn't a regular starter anyway. so that's not really a problem for them. And they loaned out Joe Rodon to Stade Rennes, who replaced him with replaced the guy that they sold to West Ham. And in third, and that's probably the most unlikely thing to happen, but I hope it's gonna happen since I'm an Arsenal fan, is Arsenal finishing third. If you look at the preseason and how we played, I think Arsenal have a really good chance, and I obviously hope. So we lost Bernd Leno to Fulham, Lacazette went back to Lyon, and we sold Guendouzi to Marseille. We bought in Gabriel Jesus for 52.2 million, which I already think is a perfect transfer. I think Gabriel Jesus is also going to be one of the best strikers in the Premier League and score a lot of goals. We bought Alexander Zinchenko for 35 million, which I think I don't really like. I watched Zinchenko play when he played for Man City a lot, and I don't really like him that much. So I don't like, from football wise, not person wise. I just think he's not really a good player, and I don't think he's worth 35 million. But yeah, and we bought in Fabio Vieira from I think it was Porto. Yeah, Porto sold us him for 35 million, and they also sold Vitinha to PSG for like 40 million or so. And I think one of the two is gonna flop massively. I really hope it's gonna be Vitinha, because the other one is an Arsenal player, but I predict this right now, one of them is gonna flop extremely hard. And we bought back William Saliba, who hopefully finally is gonna play for us. Unlike the last, like, I don't know, 2 seasons or so, where he just wouldn't let him play. Yeah, I think Arsenal are gonna finish third actually this year. And in second place, I went with Manchester City. I think Manchester City this year are gonna finish second. They obviously lost Gabriel Jesus, they lost Zinchenko, Sterling, and Fernandinho went back to Brazil. They brought in Ortega for free. I mean, that's pretty crazy, from Bielefeld to Manchester City. What a transfer. Then they got Junior Alvarez that they brought from River Plate, like in the winter or when, who now came back and already played in the Community Shield. They also bought Calvin Phillips from Leeds for 48.75 million. And obviously the biggest transfer of the best transfer of the summer, they bought Erling Haaland for 60 million.
Oh no, for Haaland.
Yeah, if Erling Haaland doesn't play like in the Community Shield, then I think Manchester City even have a chance to finish first. Obviously, they always have a chance to finish first since Man City. But yeah, I think the season that's about to come, they're gonna finish second. And then obviously in first I have Liverpool, which they lost Sadio Mane, they lost Divock Origi, Minamino, and Nico Williams, who went to Nottingham Forest. On the other hand, they brought in Darwin Núñez for 75 million from Benfica. They got Fabio Carvalho from Fulham for 5.9 million, which is an extremely good transfer. And they got some young guy from Aberdeen, Calvin Ramsey, for 4.9 million. That guy probably won't play much. So with that, that's my whole Premier League prediction. I think Liverpool are going to win. Liverpool, Tottenham, Arsenal, City are going to play Champions League. Chelsea and United Europa League. West Ham are going to be 7th and play Conference League. And Southampton, Fulham and Bournemouth are going to get relegated. So So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.
Bye, have a great time.